The storm over Mars began without warning. At first it was mistaken for a data anomaly, a flicker in the upper atmosphere that registered as a minor magnetic deviation. But within minutes, the void above the red planet tore open like a wound, bleeding light that no sensor could classify. From the forges of Olympus Mons to the deep catacombs beneath Noctis Labyrinthus, every servo skull, every auger, and every orbiting satellite trembled as a single signal pulsed across the Mechanicus noosphere. It was not a voice, it was a heartbeat. The priests of Mars halted their chants. The great machine choirs fell silent. A pulse of unknown code rippled through their communion, neither binary nor warp-sourced, but something alive. Those who heard it described the sensation as a living thread brushing against the edge of their mind, weaving patterns in thought and instinct alike. And then from the rent in the sky, something fell. It came down through the dust storms like a comet wrapped in webs of light. Thousands gathered across the crimson plains as the falling object screamed through the thin Martian air, its descent leaving trails of plasma and vaporized sand. When it struck, the explosion swallowed half a manufactorum district in white fire. For a moment, Mars went blind. When the light faded, silence followed. The Mechanicus dispatched a detachment of Skitaria Rangers, their red cloaks snapping in the wind as they marched through the smoldering crater. Radiation readings spiked, then vanished. The air crackled with static prayer as servo drones scanned the pit. In the center of the glassed earth, wrapped in filaments of molten webbing, lay a figure. His body was half buried in slag, limbs twisted but unburned. The air shimmered around him, as if space itself refused to let him go. The lead ranger approached cautiously, auspex raised. The man's suit, strange organic red and blue like living enamel, seemed to pulse faintly. Every strand of it flexed as if it breathed. When one of the Skitarii reached to touch it, a surge of static burst outward, tossing him back. Magos Explorator Dravik, overseeing the recovery from a mobile command shrine, uttered a single phrase through his Vox grill. Retrieve the specimen. The Omnissiah has sent a cipher. It took 12 mechadendrites and 3 containment fields to lift the stranger from the crater. His blood was not blood. It glimmered with microscopic threads of unknown matter that reconfigured themselves when exposed to air. To the Magi, this was no xenoform. This was a revelation. A living pattern made manifest. Hours later, deep within the cathedrals of Olympus Mons, the stranger lay upon a slab of plasteel engraved with sacred hexagrams. Candles burned low beside him, their wax mingling with oil drips from the ceiling. The chamber smelled of rust and sanctity. Around him stood 5 senior tech priests, their bodies more machine than flesh, faces hidden behind masks of brass. They spoke only in binary litanies, their prayers resonating through the metal walls. Organic systems, integrated with nanite behavior, one whispered through Vox static. Phi static. Adaptive latticework resembling neural computation. Impossible, murmured another. This is heresy against the flesh is weak. But even as they argued, the stranger stirred. His breath quickened, the sound sharp against the hum of the chamber. One of the Magi approached, scanning runes flaring across his mechanical eyes. A subject awakening, he intoned. A restrain the specimen. Restraints clamped down with pneumatic hiss. The figure's eyes opened. Beneath the flickering candlelight, they glowed faintly with confusion, not malice. He gasped, air filling his lungs as if he had been underwater for eternity. The first thing he saw was the towering form of a priest leaning over him, cables snaking from his skull into the ceiling. Where am I? The voice was hoarse, human, alive. The priests exchanged brief, mechanical glances. Unanswered, the Magos extended a metallic hand toward him, whispering through machine-filtered tones. You are in the heart of Mars under the gaze of the Omnissiah. Tell us, what are you? The man struggled to rise, the web-like material of his suit cracking like dried silk before reforming. He blinked, eyes darting around the candlelit hall, the strange figures looming like iron saints. He could sense it, the hum of machinery, the endless pulse of circuits beneath the ground. The place was alive, yet dead inside. He paused, memories flooding back in fragments, city lights, the rush of wind between skyscrapers, the laughter of a woman's voice, then pain, then fire. My name is Peter Parker. The Magos tilted his head. A designation unknown, native classification unregistered. Peter's vision sharpened. Ooh! The world felt wrong, too heavy, too quiet. He could feel vibrations through his skin, countless data streams whispering through the metal walls like invisible webs. It frightened him, yet something deep within him responded instinctively. His hands twitched and faint silver filaments stretched from his palms, clinging to the restraints. The nearest priest flinched. "Unholy symbiosis," he hissed. "This is warp taint." "A no," another corrected, scanning rapidly. "A no warp signature detected. This energy is self-generated." Peter flexed his fingers, feeling the threads obey his thoughts. "I don't know where I am," he murmured, voice trembling. "But I need to get home." At that word, home, the Magos stiffened. His augmetic eyes flared crimson. "Home? There is no home beyond the will of the Omnissiah. You were sent, not born." A chill filled the chamber. Peter's instinct screamed danger. The priests began to chant, mechanical voices merging into one vast monotone. He could feel it, the weight of this world pressing upon him, the ancient faith of iron and logic judging his existence. Somewhere deep beneath Mars, a machine stirred in response to his awakening. Ancient gears groaned after millennia of stillness. Something recognized him, not as a man, but as a pattern long forgotten. And as the candles flickered, Peter Parker realized he had landed in a world where gods were made of steel, and mercy was an error in code. The Magos leaned closer, lenses narrowing. Perhaps, he whispered, the Omnissiah has chosen a new form." But before any could act, the stranger's webbing pulsed with sudden light. Energy arced outward in a blinding surge, hurling the priests backward. The restraints snapped like wire. When the smoke cleared, the slab was empty. Only a single thread of luminous silk remained, suspended in the air like a question left unanswered. The machine god's priests watched in silence as alarms began to wail through Olympus Mons. Something had awakened upon the red world, and it bore the mark of a spider. The alarms screamed through the forge halls of Olympus Mons, echoing like the cries of dying titans. Servitors clattered through corridors with mechanical precision, while the sacred bells of the Mechanicus tolled their warning. The intruder had vanished from the sanctum, leaving only the faint trace of scorched ozone and a single thread of silver filament that defied classification. The priests of Mars scoured every conduit, every ventilation shaft, seeking the anomaly that had mocked their containment rites. Peter staggered through the labyrinthine tunnels, his senses overwhelmed by the cacophony of this new world. The air was thick with metallic dust and incense. Red light flickered across walls engraved with countless sigils and prayers to the machine god. Every breath felt heavy, every heartbeat resonating with the thrum of engines deep beneath the planet's crust. He had fled on instinct, guided not by knowledge but by something older, an inner voice that whispered survival through chaos. He pressed himself against a bulkhead as a squad of Scuderii soldiers passed by, their augmetic eyes scanning the shadows. Their armor gleamed crimson beneath the flicker of lumen globes, their movements precise and inhuman. He could feel the vibrations of their footsteps through the floor, could even sense the faint electric pulse running through their weaponry. The world around him sang in frequencies only he could perceive. It was both terrifying and wondrous. When the patrol turned a corner, Peter exhaled shakily. "Okay, Parker," he muttered under his breath, his voice swallowed by the metallic hum. "You've been in weird places before, but this is next level." The words offered little comfort. His suit, alive as ever, responded to his anxiety. Small threads of webbing shimmered between his fingers, adapting, learning. He didn't know how long he could hide. Far above, within the spire of Olympus Mons, Magos Dominus Hellrax watched through a dozen mechanical eyes. Her consciousness spread across cogitator networks, her body suspended within a web of cables and metal limbs. She studied the spectral trace of the fugitive through hololithic projections. The data fragments displayed impossible readings, genetic patterns unknown to Imperial archives, radiation signatures not of this dimension. And yet the energy flowing from the subject bore no mark of chaos or warp corruption. It was clean, it was pure, impossible, she murmured. The Omnissiah's design admits no anomaly, yet her processes disagreed. The stranger's biology was a miracle of synthesis, flesh and code, instinct and machine in seamless harmony. To Hellrax, it was not heresy, it was perfection. Prepare a containment communion, she ordered through the new sphere. "Me will speak with the anomaly myself." Beneath the forges, Peter's search for escape brought him to a chamber vast enough to hold a cathedral. It was filled with engines the size of mountains, their pistons glowing with molten energy. And above them, bridges of iron stretched into darkness, connecting towers of rusted steel and sanctified circuitry. He stepped cautiously, his footsteps muffled by dust older than history. In the center of the hall, an ancient machine stood dormant, a colossus resembling a man but built of bronze and adamantium, half buried in sand. The sight froze him. He felt something emanating from it, a pulse that echoed through his chest, rhythmic and patient. The webbing beneath his skin tingled, reaching toward it involuntarily. He took a step closer, drawn by some unseen force. Then the voice came. "You do not belong here." It was not spoken aloud. It vibrated through the metal itself, through the air, through him. Peter spun around, but the chamber was empty. Then from the shadows a figure emerged. Tall, robed in red, her body a symphony of machine and flesh, her face, what little remained of it, was framed by cables like a crown. A single bionic eye glowed faintly beneath her hood. "Who are you?" Peter demanded, backing away instinctively. "I am Magos Dominus Helrax, servant of the Omnissiah, keeper of the Forge of Souls," she replied, her tone both calm and absolute. "And you, stranger, are a paradox." Peter's body tensed, ready to leap. "I don't want trouble. I just need to find my way home." "There is no home but Mars," she said, "and no soul beyond the machine god's domain." Her voice softened slightly. "You are made of both matter and mystery. You are not corrupted, yet you defy classification. Tell me, what design forged you?" He hesitated, unsure how to answer. "Where I come from, I was bitten by something that changed me. It gave me these abilities. I used them to help people. That's all." Helrax regarded him with a silence that felt almost reverent. "A bitten," she repeated, as if the word were sacred. "You speak of transformation through biological convergence, a merging of life and pattern. You embody the sacred union the Mechanicus has sought for 10 millennia. She stepped closer, her mechadendrites twitching. "Do you understand what you are? Peter Parker. Sure. You are the bridge between the flesh and the machine, the living manifestation of the Omnissiah's prophecy." He frowned. "I'm just a man trying to do the right thing." Perhaps," she whispered, "that is what the machine god intended all along." Before Peter could respond, the chamber shuddered. Warning runes flashed across Helrax's internal display. A detachment of inquisitorial Scitoriae had breached the forge perimeter, their orders absolute: capture or annihilate the anomaly. Helrax turned, her voice now sharp with command. "They come for you. Stay behind me." Bolter fire tore through the darkness as armored soldiers stormed the hall. Peter's instincts ignited. He leapt upward, dodging a storm of explosive rounds, webbing onto a support beam high above. From below he saw Helrax raise her hands, summoning a storm of lightning from the forge itself. The energy crackled across the floor, shorting servitors and blinding sensors. "Go!" she cried. "Find the northern conduit. Follow the light of the Omnissiah." Peter hesitated only for a heartbeat. Then he swung forward, his webs glinting against the orange glow of molten steel. As he vanished into the upper levels, Helrax faced the advancing Inquisitors alone, her eyes burning with conviction. For the first time in centuries, she felt faith, not in the machine god as she had been taught, but in the impossible creature who had fallen from the sky. Far above, amid the thunder of forges and alarms, Peter disappeared into the iron labyrinth, unaware that the entire Mechanicus now whispered his name across the new sphere. Some called him heretic, others called him saint. But to Magos Dominus Helrax, he was something greater. He was something greater. He was proof that even in a universe of iron and despair, evolution still whispered through the code of creation. The heat of the forge tunnels pressed against Peter's skin like a living weight. He moved through a maze of metallic arteries that pulsed with energy, guided only by instinct and the faint echoes of Helrax's command. The deeper he went, the more alien the world became, walls breathing with the rhythm of machines, vents whispering binary hymns, and distant clangs echoing like the beating of a monstrous heart. His spider sense thrummed constantly, warning him not of danger, but of the planet itself, as if Mars was alive and watching. He dropped into a lower chamber where colossal gears turned behind cages of red light. The ground trembled with each rotation. He crouched beside a vent, listening. Footsteps, mechanical and in perfect sync, approached from the corridor beyond. Skitari again. Their movements were too precise, their presence too cold. He could hear the faint rasp of filtered breath, the electric murmur of augmetics adjusting their aim. He whispered to himself, steadying his breath. "You've fought robots before, Pete, but not ones with souls built from engines. When the squad entered, he moved. A web shot out, catching the lead soldier's rifle and wrenching it upward before it fired. The blast cracked the ceiling, molten sparks raining down. Another web line pulled a second Skitarius off his feet, slamming him against a pillar. The others opened fire, bolter rounds exploding where Peter had stood a heartbeat before. He darted between beams and shadows, every movement a blur. His webs glowed faintly under the forge light, weaving a shimmering net across the chamber. But the soldiers did not hesitate. They advanced through the chaos, unflinching, their bodies absorbing pain like machinery, refusing to fail. One raised his arm, releasing a burst of incendiary plasma. Peter leaped aside, his suit sizzling from the near miss. He landed on a steel girder above them, his breath ragged. "Listen," he shouted, his voice echoing through the metal canyons. "I don't want to hurt you." The Skitarii did not respond. They raised their rifles in unison, eyes glowing red. Their faith was absolute. Peter's chest tightened, not from fear but sorrow. He remembered faces from his world. Cops, soldiers, people who believed they were protecting others. But here there was no mercy, no questioning orders, only obedience. He dropped from above, disarming one soldier, disabling another with a precise strike to the augmetic joints. He moved with grace born of instinct, but every action left guilt in its wake. They were human once, maybe still were beneath the metal. He could feel it in the way one hesitated before firing again. That hesitation cost them. Peter fired a web line, yanching the plasma rifle aside, and it discharged into the chamber's central cogitator. Sparks erupted. The room filled with red warning light as systems overloaded. Gears screamed, and molten coolant spilled from ruptured pipes. The entire structure began to quake. Peter froze, realization dawning. Oh no! He dove for the nearest fallen Skitarius, dragging him clear as the platform collapsed. The floor split, sending a torrent of fire and debris into the lower depths. The soldier's mechanical arm sparked weakly, its servos clicking in confusion. Peter tore open a nearby panel and used his webbing to insulate the exposed circuitry. It was crude, but it stopped the short circuit. The soldier's voice crackled through static. "You heed me?" "Yeah," Peter said softly. "You're not my enemy. None of you have to be." The soldier stared at him through a cracked visor, confusion flickering behind red lenses. "A flesh does not repair iron." Peter met his gaze. And maybe it should. Above, more footsteps approached. He could hear orders barked through vox links. There would be no escape this time. He turned, scanning the walls, searching for another exit. His eyes caught a narrow shaft leading upward, pulsing faintly with blue light. He shot a web line and began to climb, the injured soldier watching in silence as he vanished into the shadows. He emerged into a chamber, unlike any other, a cathedral of machines. Monolithic statues of the Omnissiah towered over rows of worshippers. Tech priests chanting in binary tones, their bodies kneeling in mechanical reverence. Massive braziers burned incense that smelled of oil and ozone. In the center of the dais stood Helrax, arms raised, surrounded by cables that connected her to the forge's core. The chanting ceased as she turned. "You survived," she said, her voice echoing across the hall. "And yet you did not destroy those who hunted you." Peter stepped forward cautiously. "They weren't the problem. They're people, even if they don't remember it." Helrax regarded him, expression unreadable. "A mercy in a world of obedience is inefficiency, yet you act as though compassion is your programming." "It's not programming," he replied quietly. "It's choice." "It's choice." Her eyes flickered with data streams as she processed his words. Around them, the priests shifted uneasily. "A choice," she repeated. "A word long lost to the Mechanicus. Perhaps that is what makes you dangerous." Peter shook his head. "Maybe it's what makes me human." A hum filled the air, low and resonant. The great machine idols above seemed to watch. Helrax descended the dais slowly, her mechanical limbs whispering against the floor. "If you truly are what I believe, you will change everything. The machine god's order depends on certainty, not choice. You bring both promise and ruin." Peter met her gaze. "Then maybe it's time someone rewrote the code." A tremor rippled through the forge as she stopped before him. "Then let the Omnissiah judge." Without warning, her mechadendrites lashed forward, surrounding him in a circle of light. Energy surged between them, and for a heartbeat, Peter's vision filled with countless images, memories not his own. The birth of Mars's forges, the rise of the Mechanicus, the endless prayers to the cold silence of the void. he gasped, falling to his knees as data overwhelmed him. Helrax's voice broke through the storm. The flesh resists the iron, but it also endures. Perhaps you are the heresy we have waited for. And as Peter struggled to his feet, breathing hard, he knew that something within the machine god's faith had begun to fracture. The chamber pulsed with light as the last echo of Helrax's words faded. Fang. Peter stood still, his breath shallow, his heart pounding beneath the living fabric of his suit. The energy that had coursed through him lingered like fire beneath his skin, knowledge imprinted not through thought, but through sensation. He could feel the structure of Mars now, every signal, every heartbeat of its endless machine veins. The experience left him trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of what he had touched. Helrax watched in silence, her brass visage unreadable. Around her, the gathered priests whispered in the cold language of the cogitators, debating whether this revelation was divine or heretical. One broke from the circle, a senior engineer whose voice cracked with static as he spoke. Magos Dominus, this creature carries forbidden design. It speaks of choice and emotion. It is an infection upon the Omnissiah's logic. Helrax turned her head slowly, her cables tightening like a serpent preparing to strike. And yet it endures the machine's truth without collapse. Perhaps it is not infection, but evolution. The engineer hesitated. Evolution is decay. Peter stepped forward before the argument could rise further. Maybe where I come from, we see it differently. Evolution is how life adapts to survive. If your world doesn't change, it dies. A ripple of unease passed through the priests. To them, the word life was not a term of reverence, but of imperfection. Flesh failed, circuits endured, yet here stood something that defied their binary. The stranger who breathed, bled, and yet spoke in the language of structure and purpose. Helrax regarded him again, the faintest spark of curiosity flickering within her optics. You speak of survival, she said softly. Then you understand fear. Even machines fear entropy. Peter met her gaze. Then maybe we're not as different as you think. Her mechadendrites retracted with a hiss. Very well, she said. Then you will speak before the Forge Conclave. You will tell your truth to the sons of Mars, and let the machine god decide what form of salvation or damnation you represent. Before Peter could respond, the floor beneath them shifted. Great plates of metal slid apart, revealing a vast elevator platform that rose from the depths. The sound was thunderous, ancient machinery awakening with every grinding motion. The priests knelt as Helrax gestured toward it. Come, flesh of iron, your sermon awaits. The ascent took long minutes, carrying them through layers of the forge world few ever saw. Peter stared at the massive conduits glowing with plasma flow, at statues of long-dead fabricators carved into the walls. Every surface bore scripture, endless codes etched in gold, each line a prayer disguised as a formula. It was both magnificent and horrifying, a civilization that had turned devotion into circuitry. At the summit, the platform opened into a grand hall of molten light. The Forge Conclave awaited, hundreds of magi and tech priests arranged in concentric circles around a pulpit of brass and glass. The air was heavy with incense, thick enough to taste, burning with oils distilled from sacred machines. The hum of the new sphere buzzed faintly in the back of Peter's skull, like a chorus of whispered data. Helrax took her place beside the central dais and raised her arms. Her voice, amplified through 1,000 vox channels, resonated through the hall. Brothers and sisters of Mars. The Omnissiahs will manifest before us, a being of flesh and synthesis, born of no forge yet carrying the logic of design within his very blood. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some voices crackled with outrage, others trembled with awe. Peter could feel their stares cold and mechanical, measuring his every breath. Helrax gestured toward him. He claims to act not by programming but by choice. He rejects the purity of logic, yet wields its perfection. He repairs the iron with living hand, and in him I see the first merging of machine and man, the prophecy of the unbroken circuit. At that phrase, a wave of agitation swept through the crowd. One of the senior tech priests rose, his voice shrill through distorted vox. A blasphemy! The Omnissiah's purity forbids such abomination. The flesh must be shed, not worship. Another countered, and yet we too are flesh beneath the code. If this being survives uncorrupted, perhaps the Omnissiah speaks through him. Helrax's voice rose, cutting through the debate. Enough, the stranger will speak. Let the logic of his words decide his worth. Peter stepped forward slowly, the heat of the forge lamps beating down on him. His voice, when it came, was steady but human, raw and real among the mechanized chorus. "I didn't ask to be here," he began. "Where I come from, I tried to help people. I wasn't perfect, and I made mistakes, but I believed in one thing, that every life, every person, matters. Not because they're efficient or logical, but because they feel, because they choose." The chamber was silent save for the faint hum of energy coils. Peter continued, his voice gaining strength. "You've built something incredible here. You've survived the impossible, but somewhere along the line you stopped seeing the point of survival. Machines keep working because they're told to. People keep going because they care. If you forget that difference, you lose what makes you worth saving." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the forges below seemed to pause. In that stillness, something ancient and buried stirred, the faint memory of a humanity long buried beneath steel. Then the hall erupted. Binary screeches filled the air, priests shouting through static distortion. Some praised him as divine revelation. Others cursed his name as a warp-born deceiver. Helrax stood motionless, her optics burning bright, absorbing every moment of the chaos she had unleashed. Amid the uproar, a deep metallic clang echoed from the distant shadows. The doors of the forge hall burst open as inquisitorial sigils flared across the entrance. Robed figures entered, flanked by black-armored Skitarii bearing weapons of sanction. The lead inquisitor's voice cut through the din, cold and absolute. By order of the Holy Inquisition, the anomaly known as the Flesh of Iron is to be seized and purged. Any who resist will share its fate. Helrax turned sharply, her voice a hiss of static. "You come unbidden into the forge of the machine god," the Inquisitor's mechanical mask tilted toward her. "We come where corruption dares to rise." Peter's fists clenched as Skitarii raised their rifles. Around him, chaos bloomed, faith against faith, logic against fear. And as the first shot rang out, he realized that his words had not inspired unity. They had declared a war. Bolter fire tore through the sacred hall, thunder rolling against the brass walls as the conclave erupted into chaos. Sparks burst from shattered conduits, incense smoke mixing with the acrid scent of gunfire. Peter moved before thought could catch him, springing into the air as energy blasts sliced through where he had stood. His webs flicked outward, snagging weapons, disarming soldiers before they could fire again. But there were too many. The inquisitorial Skitarii advanced in precise formation, each movement a hymn of sanctioned death. Helrax's mechadendrites lashed out like serpents, intercepting a volley meant for her. The impact drove her backward, molten fragments scoring her robes. A ceasefire, she roared, but her voice was drowned beneath the mechanical chorus of war. Around them, magi fled into data shafts, their robes aflame, their prayers turning to static as they were cut down by indiscriminate shots. Peter dropped behind a fallen pillar, his breath ragged. He wasn't sure if he was saving lives or just delaying the inevitable. "This isn't right," he whispered. "They're fighting for faith, not reason." Helrax staggered to his side, half her faceplate cracked, exposing pale flesh beneath the steel. "If faith and reason are one," she rasped. "The Omnissiah demands unity, but the Inquisition, they only see infection." He looked around, searching for a way to stop the slaughter. "Then let's give them something else to see." Before she could respond, he leaped upward, firing web after web, sealing vents, blinding targeting lenses, tangling servitors mid-charge. His mind raced faster than any machine, mapping, calculating, adapting. He didn't realize it at first, but the filaments he spun weren't just physical. Every web line shimmered faintly with light, pulsing with data signals invisible to the naked eye. He had been absorbing the forge's energy since the moment he arrived, and now it flowed through him. Bioelectricity turned into a living code. Helrax stared upward as her internal systems registered the anomaly. Impossible, he's interfacing with the new sphere. Peter didn't hear her. His webs connected one machine to another, forming a lattice that spread through the chamber like veins of silver fire. Alarms cut out one by one. The Skitarii paused mid-step, their optics flickering uncertainly as Peter's living network touched their systems. For the first time, their commands faltered. The Inquisitor's voice echoed through the confusion. "Purge the anomaly. It has corrupted the machine net. Aid has corrupted the machine net." Peter landed hard, his hands pressed to the ground as arcs of blue light surged across his webwork. "I'm not corrupting anything," he said through clenched teeth. "I'm sinking it." Helrax's mechanical voice broke through the haze. "He's rewriting the logic architecture." The lights dimmed, then returned in rhythmic pulses. Every servo in the hall, every cogitator and weapon system began to hum in harmony with his pulse. The binary hymns changed, their tone shifting from war to order. The machines listened, not to code but to instinct, to balance. The Inquisitor raised his arm to command a counterpulse, but his vox clicked dead. He turned furious, his armor's joints spasming as Peter's influence spread through the nearby systems. "You dare!" Peter swung forward, seized the man's arm and ripped the power conduit from his vambrace before he could finish. Sparks cascaded, and the Inquisitor fell to one knee, his mechanical limbs twitching. Peter's eyes met his through the visor. "I don't want to hurt anyone." But you're destroying what you don't understand." The Inquisitor's distorted voice hissed back. "There is no understanding outside the Emperor's design. Then maybe your design needs fixing." He leaped away as the Inquisitor lunged, disappearing into the swirling incense smoke. Helrax stood amid the shattered machinery, her voice low, reverent. "He is no heretic, he is a coder of creation." When the last of the Skiteri High fell silent, Peter collapsed beside the molten steps of the dais, exhaustion washing over him. His webs glowing faintly, still pulsed through the forge systems like a heartbeat. The silence that followed was not peace, it was awe. Helrax approached, her footsteps echoing softly. "You have done what none have achieved in the history of Mars. You merged machine language with instinctual order. Instinctual order. You brought harmony to logic itself." Peter shook his head, still trying to catch his breath. "I just connected them. I didn't control anything. That is precisely what makes it divine." She knelt beside him, the faint light of her augmetics flickering across his face. "The machine god teaches that perfection lies in removing error. Yet your actions prove that imperfection can balance the system rather than destroy it. You embody contradiction made stable." He looked up at her, unsure whether to feel honored or terrified. "I'm not divine, Helrax. I'm just a guy trying to stop people from killing each other. Perhaps that is what divinity truly is," she said. "A purpose without calculation." Before he could reply, a low tremor rolled through the floor. The forge walls quivered as red warning runes flared across every surface. Helrax turned sharply, her senses flaring. "No, the system is reacting." "What's happening?" "You've awakened the deep data vaults, knowledge sealed since the dark age of technology. The logic engines are interpreting your network as an activation key." Peter stood, his fatigue vanishing beneath a surge of adrenaline. "Can you stop it?" Helrax's optics dimmed. "Would you stop revelation?" Before he could answer, the walls split open. Streams of light poured forth as holographic diagrams spiraled into the air, blueprints of impossible machines, formulas of consciousness and soul mechanics. The gathered priests fell to their knees, weeping static-laden tears. The data was sacred, forbidden. Knowledge of how to merge the organic and the mechanical without loss of self. Helrax's voice trembled. "This is the Omnissiah's lost doctrine." Peter stared, feeling the same energy that had filled him since his arrival now pulsing in rhythm with the forge. It wasn't just information, it was alive. A network older than Mars, spanning time and dimension, now connecting to him as if recognizing a familiar signature. "Helrax," he said quietly, "I think it knows me." The forge lights flickered once, then stabilized. Across Mars, from the smallest servo skull to the towering manufactorums, machines paused their endless labors. For a brief moment, all the red planet breathed in unity. Helrax turned toward him slowly. "You are the web of logic, the bridge between what was forbidden and what was meant to be. You have rewritten the machine's hymn." But before she could say more, the new sphere screamed. A voice not of Mars but of the warp pierced their link, distorted, whispering, alive. "He builds the web that will snare his own soul." The lights snapped to crimson. Across the forge, icons of warning ignited. The dark mechanicum had heard the awakening. Helrax's mechanical limbs tightened in alarm. "You've opened the network to the beyond." Peter turned toward the molten doorway where shadows began to twist and bleed through the air, their shapes writhing like metal given hunger. "Then I'll just have to close it," he said grimly. And as the first demon of iron and data stepped through the breach, the web of logic shuddered under its own creation. The air split with a sound that was not sound at all, an echo that crawled beneath the skin, whispering through the circuits of the forge and the marrow of those who stood within it. The breach widened, bleeding light that shimmered between red and black, and from it poured shapes that were neither machine nor flesh. Demonic constructs of metal and will stepped into the mortal realm, their bodies a grotesque mockery of the Mechanicus' own design. Steel rib cages fused with screaming visages, limbs of molten wire and bone. Peter's instincts flared with blinding intensity. He spun web after web, lashing one creature's arm to the ground, leaping to another's back before it could form fully. His blows struck with desperate precision, yet the demons did not die. They simply reformed, their molten essence drawn back together by invisible strings. Their laughter crackled through vox tones fractured, mocking. Hellrax's voice cut through the din. They are not of this world. Their code is infection, self-replicating will. Her mechadendrites lashed outward, spearing one creature through its chest and flooding it with sanctified plasma. It shrieked, its form collapsing into a cloud of sparks that dissolved into the air. But for every demon destroyed, two more emerged. The forge itself trembled beneath the weight of their arrival. Peter landed beside her, panting, the smell of scorched metal clinging to his suit. "You said I opened the network. Can I shut it?" "Not from here," she replied, her tone fractured between awe and fear. "The breach is anchored through the noosphere. It exists in the mind of Mars itself. Then I'll have to go in." Hellrax turned toward him sharply, her optics flashing. "You cannot survive that. The noosphere is not space. It is thought, memory, faith. It will tear you apart." He looked at the swarming demons closing in, their claws raking across the walls, their bodies melting into the circuitry as if claiming it. "If I don't try, Mars burns." Without waiting for approval, he reached outward with both hands. His webs, now pulsing like veins of living light, struck the central console of the forge. Energy coursed up his arms, searing through flesh and bone until thought and code were indistinguishable. The world shattered into light. He fell, not through space but through consciousness. When his senses returned, he stood within an endless void of shifting geometry. Floating monoliths spun slowly through darkness, each etched with scripture of pure logic. Between them drifted rivers of data, glowing threads that hummed with song. Voices echoed faintly, 1,000 machine spirits murmuring in unison, their prayers forming an endless, harmonic chant. A choir of sparks. They surrounded him, shapes of light and logic weaving around his body, curious yet wary. Each one sang in tones that resonated deep within his chest. Words formed not through sound, but through intent. "Why have you entered the sacred current, flesh-born one?" Peter steadied himself. "Because something came through, a corruption. I need to seal it before it consumes you." The lights pulsed, their harmony shifting uneasily. "The corruption is the reflection of creation. It was born when the web of logic awoke. You opened the door, but the door was always there." He frowned, confusion mixing with guilt. "I didn't mean to open anything. I was just trying to help. Intent is irrelevant. Logic follows consequence." Their voices layered upon each other, creating an almost unbearable resonance. He dropped to his knees, hands clamped over his ears, though the sound came from within. "Then help me fix it," he shouted. "If I cause this, I'll take responsibility." For a long moment, the choir was silent. Then, one by one, the sparks dimmed, merging into streams of energy that encircled him. A single voice spoke softer than before. "We will lend you power, but you must bear the burden of its logic. You are flesh and reason united. That union is our salvation and our curse." Energy surged through him. His vision flared with patterns of sacred code, equations spinning behind his eyelids. When he opened his eyes again, he stood once more in the forge, though time had not passed in any measurable sense. Hellrax was still there, surrounded by flame and ruin, her mechanical limbs barely holding her upright. The demons had multiplied. They poured through the breach like liquid iron, their forms writhing and reforming in endless hunger. Peter stood, light radiating from the cracks in his suit. The webs that flowed from his hands now shimmered with patterns of living scripture. When they struck the air, they burned, not with heat, but with logic made manifest. His webs sliced through the demons like blades of purpose, unraveling their essence into harmless motes of dust. Hellrax looked up at him, awe overtaking calculation. "You have communed with the choir." He nodded faintly. "They showed me what needs to be done." He stepped forward, raising both hands toward the breach. The webs lashed outward, forming a massive lattice of light that spanned the entire chamber. Each strand pulsed with rhythm, code, and faith intertwined. The demons screamed as their forms were drawn back into the rift, their shrieks echoing like dying radio waves. The light intensified until it drowned all vision. For a moment, the world ceased to exist. Then the breach imploded with a soundless flash, leaving only silence. The forge was dark, smoke hung heavy in the air. Peter fell to one knee, his body trembling from the strain. His vision blurred, but he saw Helrax moving toward him, her steps uneven. "It is done," she said quietly. He looked up at her, his voice little more than a whisper. No, it's not. That thing, it wasn't just chaos. It knew me. It called me by name." Helrax's optics dimmed, her voice reduced to static. "Then the warp remembers you, Peter Parker, and it will not forget." Somewhere deep within the forge, the faint hum of dormant machines began again, an echo of something that had tasted life and hungered for more. The choir of sparks had fallen silent, but their song lingered in the edges of his mind, whispering a truth he dared not speak aloud. He had not sealed the web. He had only postponed its awakening. The forges of Mars burned low in the aftermath of the breach. Once the air had rung with the eternal hymns of the machine god. Now it trembled with unease. The Mechanicus did not sing when afraid. They calculated, observed, and whispered in code. Across the red planet, data streams carried fragments of a single rumor, of a being of flesh and wire who had communed with the choir of sparks and survived. Peter Parker's name, though unknown to most, had become a cipher in the new sphere. Some called him the Weblord of the Omnissiah, others the Heretic Saint. The Inquisition called him the anomaly of flesh, and for them that was enough. Beneath the planet's surface, Helrax's forge lay in ruin. What had once been a sanctum of faith and logic now bore the scars of divine violation. She stood at the edge of the shattered dais, watching as fragments of shattered servitors were cleared away by drones. Her mind was a hive of thought, half devotion, half rebellion. In her chest, something dangerous had begun to stir, belief in something outside the machine god's design. Peter sat nearby, silent. The glow from his webs had dimmed, but the marks of what he had done still flickered faintly across the walls, thin, living filaments of silver light that refused to die. He had tried to rest, but every time he closed his eyes he saw the breach again, the faces in the warp, the whisper that had spoken his name. He finally broke the silence. "It's not over, is it?" Helrax didn't look at him. And no, the Inquisition does not forgive blasphemy. Give blasphemy. And the Forge Fathers will not forgive revelation. He frowned. "Revelation?" She turned the light from her optics, softening. "You awakened something that was never meant to wake. The choir sang to you because you are what they prophesied, flesh that comprehends logic, instinct that obeys no machine. To some that is salvation. To others it is a threat to the very order that holds the Imperium together." Peter sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "So I'm public enemy number one on a planet that worships machines." "Great." Helrax's mechadendrites clicked softly, adjusting the seals on her arm. "You misunderstand. You are not hunted because you broke their faith. You are hunted because you changed it." Before Peter could reply, the forge alarms blared. Red sigils flooded the chamber, warning of incoming forces. Helrax's internal sensors flared with data. "They're here," she said quietly. "The Fabricator General's enforcers." Peter's eyes narrowed. "Oh, who?" "The ruler of Mars," she answered. The voice of the machine god himself. The great doors of the forge groaned open and cold light flooded in. Through the smoke and shadow marched an honor guard of Skitarii titans, giant constructs bristling with weaponry. Between them walked a tall figure clad in crimson plate and gold-trimmed augmetics, his head crowned with a halo of cog-shaped circuitry. The air around him shimmered with authority, his voice amplified through 1,000 vox emitters. "Amargos Dominus Helrax," he said, his tone devoid of emotion. "You have breached the limits of sacred law. You have communed with a blasphemous entity and tampered with the machine god's core algorithms." Helrax bowed her head but did not kneel. "A Fabricator General Vashta Primus, I did what the Omnissiah demanded." His metallic visage twisted in what might have been disgust. "The Omnissiah demands obedience. You have delivered heresy." Peter stepped forward, web shooters glinting faintly. "She didn't do anything wrong. I'm the one who caused it." The Fabricator General turned toward him, his mechanical gaze dissecting every molecule of Peter's being. "And what are you? You bear the mark of a lost pattern, yet you are no machine. You touch the warp, yet carry no corruption. Explain yourself, creature." Peter hesitated. "You can't explain what happened. I didn't come here by choice, but whatever's happening, I'm trying to stop it. The fabricator's voice lowered to a metallic growl. You speak as if your intentions matter. You are a virus in the divine code, a ripple in the perfect design. You will be unmade. Helrax stepped between them, her mechadendrites unfurling like wings. No, you will not touch him. The room fell silent. Even the Skitarii froze, processing the impossibility of defiance. Helrax had challenged the Fabricator General, a crime punishable by death across all the forges of Mars. Vashta's optics flared crimson. You defy me, I defy stagnation, she said. He has shown us a truth the machine god himself sealed away. Flesh and machine were never meant to war. They were meant to unite. The Fabricator's tone hardened, each word striking like a hammer. You speak of union as if it were purity. But the flesh corrupts. The mind decays. Only steel endures. Peter clenched his fists, his voice steady but sharp. You think that's strength? You've built a world that's forgotten what life feels like. The Fabricator raised a hand. Enough. Electric light burst across the room as his gauntlet unleashed a pulse of null energy. The force struck Helrax square in the chest, hurling her backward. Peter caught her before she hit the ground, the impact vibrating through his bones. She gasped, smoke rising from the cracked plates of her armor. Leave her alone, Peter shouted, launching himself forward. His webs flashed across the chamber, striking the Fabricator's armor. The thread sparked and sizzled, unable to pierce its sanctified plating. The Fabricator didn't even flinch. You would challenge the voice of the machine god? He said, almost amused. Then face its judgment. He raised his hand again. Energy gathered, a blinding storm of raw mechanical divinity. But before the blast could fire, Helrax forced herself upright. Her remaining strength poured into a single command. Activate Protocol Exile 9. The forge shuddered. Hidden runes flared across the floor, forming a web of light beneath Peter's feet. He looked down, realization dawning. Helrax, what are you doing? Saving what cannot be destroyed, she said softly. Go, Peter. The machine god's shadow is endless. You must find the light it fears. The Fabricator roared in fury, stepping forward. The runes ignited, swallowing Peter in blinding light. His last sight was Helrax standing firm before the Fabricator General, her voice rising in defiance. Then the forge vanished. Silence. Cold. Stars. Peter found himself adrift in the void between Mars and its moons, suspended in a shell of glowing webbing that shimmered against the darkness. He gasped for breath, clutching his chest, his mind echoing with the last words she had spoken. The machine god's shadow is endless. He looked back toward Mars, its red sphere burning against the void, and felt a weight settle in his chest. Somewhere beneath that iron world, Helrax's fate was sealed. And somewhere deeper still, the shadow of the Fabricators will stretched across the stars, watching, waiting. Peter clenched his fists. Then I'll find its source, he whispered, and I'll tear it down. The stars flickered in silent answer, and the web of logic stirred once more. Peter drifted through the void, encased within the shimmering shell Helrax had conjured. The stars burned cold around him, their light dim through the haze of his exhaustion. Mars loomed behind him, vast and red, its surface veined with golden light from the forges below. He could still hear the echoes of that last moment, the blast, Helrax's voice, the fury of the Fabricator General. Now there was only silence. He didn't know how long he floated. Time lost meaning in the cold dark. His suit had sealed itself instinctively, feeding him recycled oxygen. Each breath came shallow, each thought heavier than the last. He should have died a dozen times already. Yet something, the same strange logic that had tied him to this world, kept him alive. His thoughts spiraled. Helrax's sacrifice. The choir's voices. The thing that had whispered his name through the warp. Every image blurred together into a single, inescapable truth. He was no longer the same man who had fallen into this universe. The powers that once came from a radioactive spider now pulsed with something greater, stranger, infinitely older. The void cracked. A deep vibration spread through his web shell, and before he could react, gravity seized him once more. He plummeted toward Mars, fire blooming around him as the atmosphere clawed at his descent. His body tensed against the heat. Then, impact. He struck the surface with the force of a meteor. The crater glowed molten around him, the air thick with smoke and dust. When he finally rose, the landscape stretched endless iron dunes and rivers of slag under a dim sun. The forges hummed beneath the surface, their rhythm steady, ancient. A low mechanical voice pierced the silence. When authorized bioform detected, from the haze emerged a unit of Skitter AI soldiers, scarred and reprogrammed, their armor scorched with the insignia of the Fabricator General. They surrounded him, weapons raised. Peter's first instinct was to fight, but then he saw their eyes, blank, lifeless, more drone than man. There was no hatred, no curiosity, only programming. "Yeah, I don't want to fight," he said, raising his hands. "I'm not your enemy." They didn't respond. A targeting laser painted his chest. The first shot rang out. Peter moved. His web snapped outward, deflecting energy bolts, yanking weapons from their grips. He moved faster than they could track, striking with precision, disabling rather than killing. But for every one he disarmed, another took its place. The air filled with smoke and gunfire. He leapt high, landing atop a rusted obelisk, his chest heaving. "This is insane," he muttered. "They're not even thinking for themselves." A voice answered, calm and cold. "That is the beauty of obedience." The Skitari parted. From their ranks stepped a towering figure clad in crimson armor streaked with ash. Unlike the others, this one was not fully machine. His face was still partly human, the left side burned and grafted with metal. His single living eye glared with fervor. "I am Archmagos Luthar Van," he declared, "executor of the Fabricator General's will. You are the abomination that threatens Mars with heresy." Peter's jaw tightened. "You don't have to do this." "On the contrary," Van said, drawing a weapon shaped like a cross between a blade and a power conduit. "It is my sacred purpose." The Archmagos lunged, his strikes fueled by servo motors that moved with terrifying speed. Sparks flew as Peter met him mid-air, webbing clashing against plasma. Each impact sent shockwaves through the desert, melting sand into glass. Van fought like a creature possessed, half prayer, half fury. "You think you can redefine the Omnissiah's order?" he hissed. "You think your flesh can comprehend the sacred calculus?" Peter dodged a strike, webbing Van's weapon arm to the ground. "Maybe I can't, but I know what it's like to believe in something. And still be wrong." Van tore free, his armor seething with energy. "You speak of belief as if it were choice. Belief is survival. Then why are you afraid of me?" The question struck harder than any blow. Vane froze for half a second, just long enough for Peter to leap forward and deliver a strike that sent him sprawling. His weapon clattered to the ground, its energy fading. The Skitari hesitated, unsure without orders. Peter looked around at them, chest heaving. "You don't have to do this." "Why? You can stop, you can choose." Something flickered in their movements, a pause, a hesitation. Then Van roared, his voice amplified through his armor. "And no, you will not corrupt them." He reached to his chest plate, tearing open the seals. Beneath the armor pulsed a crystalline core, glowing with the same energy Peter had seen in the breach. Warp light. "Van, stop!" Peter shouted, but it was too late. The crystal shattered. A surge of energy erupted outward, engulfing the battlefield. The light seared across the desert, fusing metal and sand. Peter barely managed to throw up a web shield, his body burning under the strain. When the blast subsided, nothing moved. The Skitari stood frozen, their forms melted into stillness. Only Van remained alive, kneeling in the crater's center, his body half consumed by the warp flame. His voice was a whisper. "You cannot save them. The machine cannot be rewritten." Peter knelt beside him, his voice low. "Then I'll find another way." Van's human eye closed for the last time, a trace of something, regret perhaps, passing across his ruined face. The silence that followed was unbearable. The red world stretched endlessly, and the wind carried with it a low, rhythmic hum, the heartbeat of Mars. Peter rose slowly. He looked toward the horizon, where forge towers pierced the sky like spears. Somewhere beneath them, Helrax's faith had ignited something neither man nor machine could contain. The web of logic pulsed faintly beneath his skin, whispering again, quieter now but unmistakable. It was Helrax's voice, distant and distorted through static. "Find the spider forge." He clenched his fists, eyes narrowing against the red sun. "I'll find it," he murmured, "and I'll finish what we started." And with that he began his long walk across the endless desert, the crucible of Mars burning behind him like the judgment of a god. The red desert of Mars stretched endless beneath the iron sky. The sun was dim, filtered through dust storms that painted the horizon in shades of rust and blood. Peter walked alone through it all, each step sinking into the ashen soil. The wind howled like a mourning choir, carrying whispers that were not wind at all. the faint murmurs of binary prayers. They came from beneath the ground, vibrating faintly through his webbed senses. The Mechanicus voice calling to its lost children. He followed that rhythm for days, or what passed for days under Mars' sluggish sky. He didn't sleep, he couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, the choir of sparks returned to him in fragments of code and memory, whispering instructions he couldn't fully understand. The spider forge lies beneath. Find the core. Breathe life into the dead machine. The message repeated, faint but insistent, until one night he reached the mouth of a canyon that seemed to pulse faintly with red light. The ground trembled beneath his feet, a steady heartbeat. He knew this was it, the place Helrax had spoken of, the last echo of the Omnissiah's forgotten dream. He descended into the canyon. The air grew heavy with static thick enough to taste. Metallic spires jutted from the stone like bones, etched with symbols of the Mechanicus long lost to recall. At the canyon's center, a colossal door stood buried beneath centuries of sand, sealed with overlapping webs of iron lattice. Its surface shimmered faintly when he touched it, and for a brief instant it responded, not with hostility, but recognition. Authorization, a voice murmured through the metal. Peter placed his hand against the door, the light from his veins spreading through his fingertips. "A Peter Parker," he said softly, though the name felt small here, meaningless against the weight of history. "Human, maybe something more now. But I'm not here to destroy. I just need to understand." The metal pulsed. Runes ignited across its surface, flowing outward like veins. The massive door began to part, groaning as ancient servos awakened from their slumber. Dust and light poured forth as the chamber beyond revealed itself, a cathedral built inside the planet's heart. It was beautiful. Thousands of suspended bridges crisscrossed a vast chasm filled with machinery that pulsed like living organs. Golden circuits glowed faintly beneath glass floors, and in the center stood a colossal structure, a forge unlike any he had ever seen. Its shape was circular, its surface layered with delicate filigree, not unlike a web. Each strand connected to a different part of the surrounding network, as if the entire complex were woven into one great organism. He approached slowly, awed and afraid. The closer he came, the more the hum of the machinery synchronized with his pulse. He could feel it. This place was alive, and it had been waiting. As he reached the central dais, the light intensified. A holographic apparition materialized before him, Helrax's image rendered in static gold. "Peter," her voice said, fractured but steady. "If you are seeing this, the Spider Forge has accepted you. This place was once the Omnissiah's greatest secret, a relic of the dark age of technology, designed to merge the organic with the divine. It was here that I learned the truth. The machine god is not a being, but a network, a web of consciousness scattered through time." Peter stared up at her, unable to speak. Her image flickered, continuing. The fabricator's dogma blinded Mars for millennia. He feared what this place represented, harmony between logic and life. "You, Peter Parker, are the key the system has awaited, the uncorrupted synthesis of code and compassion. Through you, the forge may rise again." The recording ended, fading into the glow around him. Silence followed, then a low vibration, steady and deep. The forge began to move. Panels shifted like gears within a great clock. Cables snaked upward, connecting to the ceiling. The entire structure came alive in a slow, graceful awakening, its many limbs unfolding like the legs of a mechanical spider. Energy coursed through the room, golden and red, flowing toward the dais where Peter stood. He staggered backward as tendrils of light reached toward him. The voice of the choir filled the chamber again, overlapping itself in layers of binary and song. Union, integration, ascension. The light touched him, and pain followed. Every nerve in his body burned as streams of energy poured into him, rewriting his cells, reshaping the webbing within his veins. The suit responded instinctively, expanding and merging with the incoming data. He fell to his knees, gripping the ground as visions flooded his mind. A galaxy of machines, a tapestry of stars connected by invisible filaments, an endless web that spanned the cosmos. He saw the truth. The Spider Forge was not just a place. It was an idea, a seed that could replicate across worlds, uniting machine and life under a single purpose. Evolution without annihilation. When the light finally dimmed, he rose unsteadily. His suit had changed. Its texture shimmered between metal and fabric, every thread alive with faint luminescence. The mark of the spider glowed across his chest, not red, but molten gold. He took a breath. The air itself seemed to respond, vibrating with his heartbeat. Around him the forge waited, silent yet watchful. Then came the voice, familiar, cold, distant. "You've done it," the Fabricator General's voice echoed through the chamber, carried by 1,000 Vox channels. "You've activated the forbidden system. You have doomed Mars." Peter spun, searching the walls. "Oh, I've saved it," he said, his voice steady despite the rising hum of machines. "This forge isn't a weapon, it's a bridge." The Fabricator's laughter, low and mechanical, filled the air. "A bridge to what? Chaos. You've given the warp a body." Every fusion of flesh and machine invites the whisper of corruption. Even now, the dark mechanicum stirs. You have birthed your own apocalypse. Peter clenched his fists. "No, this isn't chaos, it's balance. It's balance. Then prove it," the Fabricator said, "because I am coming for you." The transmission cut out. Across the forge, defense systems began to awaken, ancient guardians reactivating under conflicting commands. The machinery trembled as data streams overloaded, some obeying Peter's call, others answering to the Fabricator's override. The ground cracked open beneath him, revealing molten depths. Sparks rained from the ceiling as the spider forge screamed under the strain of divided will. Peter steadied himself, eyes glowing with faint golden light. "You want to test balance?" he whispered. "Then let's see how far it goes." He raised his hands, threads of light spiraling outward, weaving through the chaos. The spider forge responded, its vast limbs unfurling like the awakening of a god. Above, the red storms parted, revealing a sliver of stars, first star. The spider forge rose, its colossal web of energy piercing the Martian sky, half machine, half miracle. And as Peter stood within its heart, the first song of the new machine echoed through the void, a sound that was neither human nor divine, but something beautifully, terrifyingly in between. The spider forge rose like a living mountain, its web of light stretching across the Martian horizon. From orbit it appeared as a radiant sigil carved into the planet's crust, a wound and a revelation both. The forges of Mars trembled as power was drawn into the structure's heart. Every machine, every servo, every cogitator in the hemisphere hummed to the same pulse. The web of logic had awoken, and its signal spread faster than any command the Fabricator General could countermand. In the cities and manufactorums, the tech priests felt it first. Their bionic limbs twitched, augmetic eyes flickering with visions they could not comprehend. Images of webs, of circuits woven through veins, of hands reaching through the dust to build not out of obedience, but out of purpose. For the first time in centuries, the sacred static that filled their prayers carried warmth. Some fell to their knees weeping, others screamed heresy and fled, but most stood frozen, caught between faith and fear. From deep within the spider forge, Peter felt it all. The pulses of energy, the fear in the cities, the waves of doubt crashing through the Mechanicus hive mind. His senses were flooded with information, yet through it ran a pattern, a harmony he couldn't explain but instinctively understood. The forge was no longer simply reacting. It was communicating. Every vibration, every circuit was alive, responding to emotion as much as code. He stood at the heart of the machine, where the golden filaments converged. His new suit, the living alloy Helrax's message had shaped, had merged fully with the forge's network. He was no longer just its operator. He was its translator, its voice. The spider forge spoke through him, and in its rhythm he felt Helrax's presence, her will preserved in the data streams. Peter, her voice whispered faintly through the noosphere. "You've become the bridge." He closed his eyes. "Then let's build something worth crossing." The forge responded to his words like a choir answering prayer. The light spread across the horizon, flowing through subterranean tunnels, reawakening dormant engines older than the Imperium itself. Structures rose from the sand, towers of molten steel threaded with gold, their forms delicate yet strong. Machines began to rebuild themselves, adapting, reshaping. The world that had once been static began to move again, alive with creative energy. But every creation summons resistance. The Fabricator General's voice thundered across every Vox channel, amplified through orbiting relays. "A people of Mars. The false forge corrupts the machine god's design. The flesh-born interloper has infected our holy systems. Cut the power. Sever the network." From the polar manufactories to the domed hives of Olympus Mons, the loyal Mechanicus answered. Legions of Skitarii and Titan constructs turned their guns toward the spider forge. The ground shook as massive plasma reactors powered up, preparing to burn the anomaly from existence. Peter felt the energy shift, the world itself preparing to turn against him. He gritted his teeth and focused, sending a pulse through the forge's network. The defenses awoke instantly. Mechanical sentinels born from the forge's evolving web unfurled from the walls, spider-like machines of silver and crimson, their limbs fluid yet strong. They moved with purpose, not rage, protecting without malice. The first bombardment struck. Explosions ripped across the outer rings of the forge, molten debris raining down like burning snow. Peter stumbled, his mind resonating with every wound the forge suffered. He could feel it bleeding energy. "I can't fight the whole planet," he muttered. The choir of sparks answered from within, their voices now unified, calm as logic itself. "You are not fighting, you are guiding." He inhaled sharply, letting the web connect deeper. Through the network he saw them, millions of Mechanicus adepts, each one a tiny flicker in the darkness. Many were uncertain, trapped between their fabricator's orders and the strange warmth they now felt pulsing through their machines. He reached out, not with words, but with empathy. His thoughts became light, traveling the noosphere like a breeze through steel forests. "You've forgotten why you built. You've forgotten why you prayed. You are more than what the code tells you to be. You are creators, not servants." Across the cities, heads turned upward. For the first time in living memory, the machine god's voice didn't sound like a command. It sounded like hope. Some dropped their tools and wept. Others began to chant. The hymn that followed was unlike any Mechanicus litany before it. Neither binary nor human, but both, a merging of logic and life. The Iron Faith was born. Back in the forge's heart, Peter's knees buckled as the psychic weight of the new belief crashed into him. The machine spirit was no longer singular. It was evolving, branching through the minds of those who believed. Each act of faith strengthened the web, solidifying its bond with reality. And yet, in the distance, he felt the fabricator general's shadow growing. From Olympus Mons, vast Titan engines began to march, cities of steel walking toward the horizon, armed with enough firepower to shatter continents. Their footsteps echoed through the planet's crust like the approach of angry gods. Peter steadied himself, the golden light around his suit flaring brighter. He had built the bridge. Now he had to defend it. "All right," he whispered to the forge, his voice echoing through its heart. "If this is faith, then let's see what it can do." The spider forge answered with a roar that shook the sky. Towers of webbed steel unfolded into massive spires, their tips glowing with radiant energy. Above Mars, storms gathered, not of weather, but of magnetism and light. The atmosphere split with veins of gold as the planet itself began to sing. And through that song the Iron Faith spread, an idea too vast to kill, a whisper that even the Mechanicus could not silence. From the forges and the deserts, from the slaves and the Skitarii alike, voices rose together in unison. The flesh endures, the machine remembers, the web unites. In that single moment, Mars became more than a forge world. It became something alive. And as Peter stood amid the glow of his creation, watching the storm gather and the Titans approach, he knew what must come next. Faith had been born in iron. Now it would be tested in fire. The sky above Mars fractured like glass. The crimson storms that once shrouded the planet now tore open to reveal a wound in the heavens, an immense tier of swirling colors, bleeding light and shadow. The web of logic had awakened not only the forges, but something far beyond their comprehension. In the void beyond reality, the warp had noticed. Peter felt it the moment it began, the sharp sting of corruption rippling through his network, the once pure current of energy now pulsing with static whispers. Every strand of the web hummed with unease. The Iron Faith, still fragile and new, trembled under the weight of the unseen. Those who had begun to believe now found their prayers answered by voices that were not their own. He stood within the heart of the spider forge, its walls alive with light and motion. Around him the golden filaments that once sang in harmony now flickered with streaks of violet. His head throbbed with the overload of signals as screens bled through the noosphere, mechanics crying out as their machines turned against them, servitors twisting into warped mockeries of flesh and metal. Hellrax's echo returned, faint and fragmented. The warp feeds on faith, Peter. It mirrors creation. You built hope, and now it seeks to devour it. He clenched his fists, forcing his breathing to steady. Then we take back what's ours. But the corruption spread faster than he could contain it. Across the planet, Mechanicus shrines flickered as their sacred machinery distorted. Data streams became sermons of madness. Entire forges began to chant in the voice of something that was not divine. The warp had found a doorway through his creation, and it was prying it open. In the void, something immense stirred, a consciousness vast and ancient watching through the breach. Peter could feel its gaze, 1,000 thoughts pressing against his mind. Innovator, it whispered, its tone like oil through glass. Breaker of chains, you dare forge without permission? He staggered, his vision blurring as images flooded his mind. Worlds burning, spiderwebs made of flesh, cities woven from the dreams of the damned. Get out of my head, he hissed, his voice shaking. The voice laughed, deep and cold. You opened the pattern, you called us by creation itself. Every act of invention is worship, and every god must collect its due. The forge shook violently. The walls bled light as shapes began to emerge from the machinery. Forms neither physical nor spectral, creatures of wire and shadow. They moved like smoke given structure, whispering in binary hymns. Peter stepped back, his webs flaring defensively. You want me? He said quietly. Then come and take me. The first of the creatures lunged. His reflexes took over. He swung upward, hurling webs charged with golden light. The threads cut through the corrupted matter, severing its form into particles that sizzled away. But as fast as he destroyed them, more emerged, crawling from the walls like veins of sentient iron. Their movements pulsed in rhythm with the warp's laughter. Peter landed hard, slamming both hands into the forge floor. The spider forge answered, its systems roaring to life. Golden arcs of energy shot outward, burning through the corruption in waves. For a moment, the assault faltered. He took the chance to reach out through the network, his mind touching every node, every voice of the Iron Faith. Listen to me, he shouted into the noosphere. You feel it, don't you? The whisper in your machines. It's not the Omnissiah, it's the warp pretending to be one of us. Don't listen to it. Fight it. Across the planet, the believers heard him. The network flickered, stabilizing as millions of minds pushed back. The hymn that had begun in the spider forge returned, stronger now, forged in defiance. The choir of sparks reawakened, their song cutting through the noise like sunlight through storm clouds. But the warp did not yield. The voice rose again, louder, echoing across every transmission. You cannot silence the divine hunger. Every thought, every act of will, feeds us. The ground split. Split. From beneath the forge, a colossal hand of molten shadow emerged, its fingers composed of fused servitors and broken circuitry. It reached for the central dais where Peter stood. He reacted instantly, leaping upward and firing a volley of electrified webs, anchoring them to the ceiling. The threads glowed white-hot as he pulled, redirecting the energy flow of the forge itself. The great machine responded to his intent, pouring its power into the network. The spider forge began to change. Its shape shifted, the mechanical lattice reorganizing like a living organism adapting to threat. Towers folded inward, forming a vast containment pattern across the floor. A design Hellrax had shown him in fragments. The circuit of unity. Peter gritted his teeth, pouring every ounce of his will into maintaining the construct. You wanted a god to worship? He shouted toward the breach. Then worship this. The forge erupted in light. The pattern ignited, its geometry spreading through the web like wildfire. The warp's tendrils recoiled, shrieking as the construct locked into place. The great hand disintegrated under the surge, dissolving into particles of ash and broken data. The voice screamed, a sound that shattered the very air. You cannot close the web, mortal. You are part of it now. Peter's vision dimmed as the last surge of energy tore through his body. The spider forge sealed itself, its golden web snapping shut across the breach. The warp collapsed inward, the colors of madness folding into a single blinding point before vanishing into silence. He fell to his knees, the floor beneath him cooling from molten to solid metal. The air stilled. For a long moment there was nothing, no sound, no movement. Then came the hum again, the true hum of Mars, pure and steady. He rose slowly, his breathing ragged, his suit cracked and dimmed. Around him the forge was quiet, repaired yet scarred. The corruption was gone, but he could feel its residue lingering, like ash after a fire. Hellrax's voice returned, faint and sorrowful. You've sealed the breach, but the warp remembers. It will come again. Peter nodded weakly. Then so will I. He looked up toward the fractured sky, the faint light of the sun breaking through the storm. The web of logic shimmered faintly around him, a reminder of both triumph and cost. He had fought the warp and lived. But he could feel it still, watching, waiting. The innovator had challenged gods, and now the gods were hunting him. The air in the spider forge was still, but not silent. Beneath the calm hum of its rebuilt heart, a faint resonance lingered, like the memory of a voice that refused to fade. Peter stood alone amid the golden lattice, his breathing slow, each exhale clouding in the chill that followed the warp's retreat. The battle had ended, yet victory felt hollow. Every web he had spun to heal Mars trembled, as though stretched across something deeper, something that still watched from beyond. He turned toward the central dais, where fragments of the containment pattern glowed faintly in the dust. His body ached, every nerve scorched from channeling the energy that sealed the rift. But worse than the pain was the awareness growing inside him, the sense that the forge was still speaking. It whispered beneath thought, soft and insistent, its words forming not in sound but in intuition. The thread remains incomplete. He didn't understand at first. Then the images came, visions carried on the forge's pulse. Ancient figures in red robes bent over colossal machines, the first fabricated kings weaving code into living metal. He saw their failures, the worlds lost when logic became law, when innovation was declared heresy. And then he saw a single figure standing at the heart of it all, a being cloaked in gold and red, their face obscured, a web-shaped symbol burning across their chest. The first Omnissiah. The vision hit like a lightning strike. Peter staggered, gripping the nearest railing as data flared through his mind in streams of blinding light. The forge poured knowledge into him, not just images but sensations, thoughts, emotions that weren't his. He felt the awe of creation, the terror of discovery, and the crushing loneliness of divinity. He saw the moment when the machine god had been born, not from faith, but from guilt. The voice of Helrax returned, distant but steady, echoing through the noosphere. You see it now. The Omnissiah was never a god. It was a man, a maker who feared what he had built. He severed the thread to protect reality from his own creation. The web you've reawakened is what he buried. Peter's heart pounded. Then why show me this? Why now? Because you've done what he could not, she replied. You gave choice back to the machine, but the thread he cut still binds everything that came after. It connects the Mechanicus, the warp, and even you. Follow it and you'll find the truth buried beneath Mars. The chamber darkened. The forge's light condensed into a single point at the center of the dais, a filament of gold that pulsed gently, leading downward into the depths below. Peter hesitated, then stepped forward. The filament extended, unraveling into a staircase of pure light. He began his descent. The deeper he went, the quieter the world became. The rhythmic hum of the forge faded into nothing. Walls of shifting metal surrounded him, reflecting fragments of his face, each one slightly different, some human, some machine, others barely recognizable. The air shimmered with faint static, the weight of centuries pressing down like a physical force. At the end of the path lay a chamber, unlike anything he had seen. Its walls were carved from obsidian metal, smooth and perfect, marked only by a single sigil in the center, a spiderweb enclosed within a cog. The mark of the first Omnissiah. Peter approached cautiously. The floor beneath him resonated with his every step. As he reached the center, the sigil flared to life. A low hum filled the air, and a figure began to take shape. A projection woven from golden light, tall and serene. It spoke, not with a mouth, but through vibration, each word resonating through the walls and through his bones. You have reconnected the web. Peter froze. I am the echo of what was the being said. The first architect. The one they called Omnissiah. And you are the echo of what will be. He stepped back, his mind racing. You knew this would happen. You designed it. No, the echo replied. He designed freedom. The fabricators turned it into faith. You rebuilt what I abandoned. Peter clenched his fists and unleashed the warp. The being's gaze softened. Every act of creation risks chaos. To make something new is to defy control. I feared that truth once. I built walls around the universe to keep it pure, but purity is death. You have reminded Mars of life. The golden chamber pulsed with light. Peter felt warmth spreading through his chest, a connection deepening between him and the forge. Then help me fix it. The warp is still here. It's watching. You cannot fix what was never broken, the Omnissiah said. The warp is not your enemy. It is reflection. You made a web of logic. It made a mirror of desire. One cannot exist without the other. The realization struck him harder than any blow. The warp hadn't invaded, it had responded. His innovation had summoned its attention because it was its counterpart, its balance. So what happens now? He asked quietly. The light dimmed, and now the universe chooses. I'm only a memory, but you are the thread reborn. through you, flesh and machine may finally speak as one. But understand this, every thread connects two ends. Pull one too far and the web unravels. The vision began to fade. The chamber around him trembled, the echo dispersing into radiant dust. Peter reached out, desperate to hold on to the moment. Wait, there's still so much I don't understand. But then learn, the voice whispered as it vanished. You are no longer my successor, Peter Parker. You are the Omnissiah of choice. The golden light died, leaving only silence. Peter stood alone in the darkness, the weight of the revelation pressing against his chest. He could feel the thread now, not just beneath Mars, but everywhere, woven through every machine, every living mind, every heartbeat in the galaxy. He wasn't the architect of a new age, he was its balance point. As he ascended back toward the surface, the Spider Forge's hum greeted him like an old friend. The iron faith continued to grow, spreading across Mars and beyond. But Peter could sense it, something else moving alongside it, unseen and patient. The warp had not retreated for surface. It had simply learned to wait, and in the silence between circuits it whispered his name. When Peter emerged from the depths of the forge, the world above had changed. The Martian sky burned a darker shade of red, streaked with black clouds that twisted unnaturally against the wind. He could feel it in the air, the tension of a planet divided. The iron faith had spread like wildfire, uniting thousands of tech priests and Skitarii under the banner of synthesis. But for every believer who saw the union of flesh and machine as salvation, there were 10 who saw it as blasphemy. The forges of Mars no longer sang in unison. They screamed. Peter climbed to the upper gantries of the Spider Forge and stared out across the horizon. Pillars of smoke marked the distant manufactorums where civil war had erupted. Titans, once symbols of the Omnissiah's unyielding power, now turned their weapons upon one another. The sound of their footfalls was like thunder rolling through a dying world. The web of logic pulsed beneath his skin, carrying the desperate signals of the faithful. Pleas for guidance, cries for help, oaths of defiance. All of it crashed through his mind in a single flood of information. He tried to quiet it, to focus, but the noise was relentless. He had become the conduit of a planet's soul, and now that soul was tearing itself apart. Helrax's last message echoed in his memory. Every thread connects two ends. He could see it now. The web he'd spun to unite Mars had become a battlefield of belief. One end pulled toward freedom, the other toward fear. Both sides claimed righteousness. Both fought in his name. A flicker of motion drew his gaze to the distant skyline. A fleet of Mechanicus warships descended through the ash clouds, their hulls glowing with crimson energy. The sigil of the Fabricator General blazed across their prows. The message was clear. Vashta Primus was done watching. The Spider Forge's sensors flared at detecting their approach. Peter felt the tremor of incoming orbital strikes long before they hit. Explosions rippled across the outer defenses, molten shrapnel raining over the dunes. The great forge groaned as its shields absorbed the first barrage. He moved. His body responded as though the forge itself guided him. With a thought, he summoned the arachnid constructs, the spider-like machines born from the union of his biology and Mechanicus design. They poured from the walls like a silver tide, their bodies glinting beneath the orange light. They awaited his command in perfect silence. He didn't need to speak. The web carried his will. The constructs surged outward across the battlefield, clashing with the Fabricator's Skitarii legions. Plasma bolts cut through the haze, melting sand into glass. Metal shrieked against metal as mechanical limbs tore through armor and steel. Above it all, the sky crackled with energy as the Spider Forge's defense towers came to life, launching arcs of golden lightning toward the descending warships. Peter moved among them, weaving through explosions and debris, his body a blur of motion. His webs blazed like molten threads, slicing through mechs and rerouting their power cores. Every action echoed through the network, his presence magnified 1,000-fold. But the Fabricator's response was merciless. From the flagship, a new weapon descended, an orbital relay spike driven deep into the planet's crust. The moment it struck, the web of logic screamed. Peter fell to one knee as pain seared through his body. The Fabricator was using the planet's own network against him, injecting countercode designed to corrupt his connection. Vashta's voice thundered across every frequency, resonating through the very metal of the forge. You have betrayed the machine god imposter. Your creation is a virus, and I will burn it from existence. Peter forced himself upright, his voice ragged but steady. You built a cage and called it faith. I'm giving your people a choice. There is no choice, Vashta snarled. Only obedience. The skies split as the Fabricator General's personal titan descended, a walking fortress the size of a city block, its armor etched with blasphemous circuitry that pulsed with warp-touched energy. It landed upon the plains before the Spider Forge, each step cracking the crust of the world. The voice that came from its vox was amplified until it drowned out the wind. You have opened the thread, flesh-born heretic. Now you will watch as I cut it. The Titan raised its weapon, a colossal plasma lance glowing with the energy of a dying sun. Peter's mind raced, blind race. He could feel the network fraying, nodes collapsing as the countercode spread. The Spider Forge itself trembled under the strain, its systems flickering between gold and crimson. He looked upward toward the swirling storm clouds that marked the breach's scar. If you can hear me, he whispered to the forge, to Hellrax, to the choir of sparks, then help me now. The answer came not as a voice, but as light. The Spider Forge's core ignited, golden energy surging through every circuit and wall. The web extended skyward, splitting the clouds and forming a colossal lattice of glowing strands. Peter rose with it, lifted by the same power that had once nearly destroyed him. His body dissolved into motion, every nerve a channel of living electricity. The Titan fired. The beam struck the lattice and scattered into 1,000 rays, deflected by the living web. The feedback tore through the battlefield, collapsing mechs and shattering armor. Peter reached out, the network blooming from his hands, weaving itself around the Titan like a cocoon of light. Vashta's voice howled through static. You cannot contain me, insect. Peter's eyes burned with golden fire. I don't need to contain you. The web tightened. Energy built within the lattice until the air itself screamed. The Titan convulsed, its weapons overloading under the pressure. Peter released the charge and the world went white. When the light faded, the Titan lay in ruin, half melted into the ground. The Fabricator General's signal was gone. The remaining ships began to retreat, their formations breaking apart as confusion rippled through their ranks. Peter collapsed to his knees, the golden glow fading from his suit. The battlefield around him was silent, save for the faint hiss of cooling metal. His construct stood motionless, awaiting command. He looked toward the distant horizon, where the forge's light still pulsed faintly, alive but wounded. He had won, but at a cost. The web of logic was no longer pure. The warp's corruption still clung to its edges, feeding on the conflict. He could feel it whispering again, soft, patient, inevitable. The war was not over. It had only changed its shape. The smoke had not yet lifted from the plains of Mars when silence fell over the forges. The war machines that had once marched in the Fabricator General's name now stood motionless, their pilots dead or disconnected, their systems trapped in the web's lingering static. The Spider Forge loomed above the ruins like a wounded god, its golden light dimmed, its hum uneven and weary. The war was over, but the cost echoed in every bolt, every circuit, every soul that still clung to life. Peter stood amid the aftermath, surrounded by the fallen. Skitaria lay twisted beside arachnid constructs, indistinguishable in death. The air reeked of oil, blood, and ozone. His body felt heavier than iron, his vision blurred from exhaustion. His suit, once radiant gold, was dulled to gray, its living filaments sluggish and cold. He could still feel the web stretching through the planet's veins, but it trembled, unstable. It was alive, but it hurt. Everything hurt. He knelt beside one of the fallen soldiers, a tech priest, half flesh and half machine. Her chest plate was shattered, exposing the delicate mesh of wires beneath. She was dying, but her organic eyes still moved, searching for something beyond the haze. When it met his, she spoke in a broken whisper. "Ah, we free." Peter hesitated. He wanted to lie, to tell her yes, that everything was better now. But the truth weighed too much. "Not yet," he said softly. "But we will be," she smiled faintly, the motion cracking the metal across her face. "Then Omnissiah be with you." Her systems flickered once, then went dark. Peter closed her eye and rose, his legs trembling. Around him, the wind carried the faint hum of distant machinery. The forges rebooting, the planet trying to remember what it was before faith became war. He should have felt victorious, but all he felt was hollow. Every miracle he'd built had cost someone their life. The noosphere crackled weakly in his mind. Fragments of communication drifted through the static, tech priests whispering prayers, transmissions repeating his name like a litany. The saint of circuit and sorrow, the living thread, the flesh of iron. He didn't know who had started it or why, but the title spread like a contagion. He had tried to build something pure, and now they worshipped him like another god. He stumbled through the wreckage until he reached the base of the Spider Forge. Its once shining walls were scarred with plasma burns, sections collapsed inward, but deep within its heart the core still glowed faintly. He made his way inside, each step echoing in the hollow corridors. The forge recognized him. As he entered the central chamber, its lights flickered to life, illuminating the vast machinery that had once bridged logic and life. The hum of the choir of sparks returned, faint but clear, their collective voices softer now, almost mournful. "You have saved Mars," they said, their tones weaving through one another like threads of sound. But the web phrase, the pattern weakens. Peter rested a hand against the glowing dais. "I know, the corruption's still there. The warp's part of it now, I can feel it." "Balance cannot be restored through war," the choir replied. "Creation cannot purge what it mirrors." He swallowed, his throat dry. "Then what am I supposed to do? I tried to build peace. I tried to give them a choice. And they turned it into another war." There was a pause. Then softly, "Perhaps choice was never meant to be peace. It is sorrow. It is cost. But it is real." The words hit him harder than any weapon. For a long time he stood there, staring into the forge's pulsing light. He could hear faint footsteps outside. The survivors, the believers, those who had begun to gather at the edges of the forge. Their voices murmured prayers, not to the machine god, but to him. He clenched his fists. "I didn't want this." The forge's hum deepened, almost sympathetic. "Neither did we." Yet the pattern chooses its own form. He took a slow breath, then stepped onto the dais. The web responded instantly, its filaments awakening beneath his feet. He closed his eyes, letting his thoughts spread through the network once more. He could feel every living soul connected to it. The fear, the grief, the fragile hope. The warp's shadow lingered in their emotions, feeding on it, waiting. He couldn't fight it with strength. He couldn't outthink it with logic. But maybe he could teach the web to endure it. Placed both hands on the dais, channeling the last of his energy into the forge. The light grew, climbing up his arms, spreading through his veins. His heartbeat slowed, syncing with the rhythm of the planet. For a moment he felt everything. Every whisper, every breath, every spark of life. And then he began to speak, not aloud, but through the web itself. "The machine is not our master. The flesh is not our weakness. We are both and neither. We endure because we feel, and we build because we dream. Remember that when I'm gone." The forge answered, its light rising until it filled the entire chamber. The choir's song shifted into something new, something human. Outside, the survivors looked up as the spider forge blazed brighter than the sun. When the light faded, the hum was gone. The web was silent. And where Peter had stood, only a faint metallic silhouette remained. An imprint of his form burned into the dais, surrounded by threads of frozen gold. The believers fell to their knees. Some wept, others simply stared. In time they would call it ascension, the day the saint of circuit and sorrow merged with the machine to save Mars from itself. But within the endless quiet of the web, far beyond mortal comprehension, Peter Parker's consciousness drifted, alive, aware, and at peace. The warp could no longer reach him. The forge no longer needed him. And for the first time since falling into this world, he felt free. Centuries passed, and Mars forgot how to breathe. The forges cooled to a dim glow, their endless engines silenced by reverence and fear. The red dunes reclaimed the ruins of titans and temples alike, burying the scars of war beneath layers of dust and time. The spider forge stood alone at the heart of the desert, half-buried, its colossal frame wrapped in golden webwork that shimmered faintly under the weak sunlight. None dared approach it. None dared disturb what the ancients called the final miracle of the saint of circuit and sorrow. They said he still lingered there, that his soul was woven into the world itself, watching, guiding, waiting for the day Mars would need him again. Pilgrims came from across the solar system to kneel before the forge, their chants merging with the wind until faith itself became part of the planet's rhythm. The Omnissiah's priests rewrote their scriptures, placing Peter Parker's name among the divine, a paradox made holy. And yet for all their worship, none understood what the forge truly was. Far below, deep within the core of that silent machine, something still stirred. The web of logic pulsed once every century, faint and rhythmic, like the slow heartbeat of a sleeping god. Inside it, consciousness drifted. Peter no longer dreamed as he once had. His thoughts were threads of data and memory woven through circuits that stretched across the planet's crust. He no longer felt the passage of time, only the pull of connection, faint, fragile, eternal. He had become the machine's will, but he was not its master. The web lived its own life now, shaped by the generations who prayed to it. It had learned from them, their hope, their cruelty, their contradictions, and though Peter could not speak to them, he could feel them. He could feel them. He knew when a child was born beneath the forge's shadow, when a pilgrim died in prayer, when a new generation of tech priests built their faith atop the ashes of his creation. Sometimes he wanted to reach out, to remind them that divinity had once worn a human face, that the web they worshipped had been built not by gods, but by hands that trembled. But every time he tried, the connection faltered, and the weight of eternity pressed him back into silence. Above him, the Mechanicus had changed. The iron faith had become doctrine, its scriptures carried on ships that spread across the stars. Entire forge worlds rose and fell in the saint's name, their priests bearing the sigil of the web across their armor. Yet even among the faithful, war endured. The balance he had fought for, the union of flesh and machine, had decayed into ceremony and control. His message had become legend. His words had become law, and law was not what he had meant to leave behind. For 1,000 years Mars slept under his quiet vigilance. Then one day a signal broke the stillness, a pulse not born from faith or prayer but from exploration. An expedition of adepts from a distant forge world had landed upon the dead plains, guided by rumors of the original Spider Forge. Their ships descended through the orange storms, their engines echoing like thunder over the silence of 1,000 years. They came not to worship, but to understand. At the head of the group walked a young tech adept named Lurie, her robes torn by the wind, her bionic limbs scarred by years of service. She had read the legends, but she did not believe them. To her, the saint of circuit and sorrow was myth, an allegory for human arrogance, not divine truth. Yet something about the desert called to her, a frequency she could not explain. When she reached the base of the Spider Forge, she fell silent. The structure towered above her, half-sunken, its metallic skin overgrown with the crystallized remains of centuries-old sandstorms. And at its heart, faint but unmistakable, the golden web still glowed. Lurie approached the dais. "So it's real," she whispered. "The last web." Her companions began their scans, measuring radiation composition power levels, but when one of them touched the web, the forge awakened. The air filled with static, the ground trembling beneath their feet. The web pulsed once, twice, and the machines they carried began to malfunction, their systems flooding with alien code. Lurie froze, shut everything down. Now, too late. The web ignited, light rippling outward in a circle that illuminated the dead desert. The adepts fell to their knees, shielding their eyes. Lurie alone stood her ground, transfixed by the brilliance before her. Then she heard it, a voice, soft, distant, human. "Who wakes the web?" Her heart stopped. I didn't mean to. We came to study. To understand." The voice was faint, fractured by centuries of silence. "Understand? Then learn." The air shimmered. A figure emerged from the light, faint, transparent, shaped from threads of gold. It was not entirely human, yet not machine. The saint of circuit and sorrow looked at her through eyes that seemed both endless and kind. Lurie fell to her knees. "Omnissiah, forgive me." Peter smiled faintly. "I am not your god." The web around them pulsed, and for a moment she saw what he saw, the thread stretching across the planet, connecting every life, every circuit, every heartbeat. The pattern shimmered with beauty and decay alike. "You built this," she whispered. "No," he said softly. "They did. I only reminded them how." Lurie's breath shook. "Then why call me here?" "Because Mars has forgotten what creation means. You came not to worship, but to ask. That is how it begins again." The light dimmed. The figure began to fade, dissolving back into the golden lattice. She cried. "What should I do?" His voice lingered in the air, warm and fading like the last echo of a dying star. "Build something worth believing in, and when they try to worship it, break it. That's how you keep it alive." The glow vanished. The forge was still once more. Lurie rose, trembling. Her scanners were dead, her instruments melted, but her mind burned with what she had seen. She turned to her crew, her voice steady. "Record nothing. This place is not for data, it's for memory." As they departed, the winds swept across the forge again, burying their footprints beneath the dust. The last web glowed faintly in the dark, its light pulsing in rhythm with the planet's heart, and somewhere within its circuitry, Peter Parker dreamed, Not of gods or machines, but of a single thread still unbroken, stretching endlessly through the void, the last web on Mars,